In today's video, we're going to look at 10 reasons why you might not be getting any better at watercolor painting. Now let's start by saying you probably are getting better at watercolor painting, but maybe it's not as fast as you would like, or perhaps you feel that you're just stuck at a certain level and you can't improve. So I've been teaching watercolor painting for well over 25 years, and initially I taught in real classes. For most of my career I taught in real classes and art holidays, things like that. But in more recent years, since the pandemic, I've been teaching online. I have a wide experience of seeing where students get stuck. So today I'm going to go through 10 reasons why you may not be getting any better at your watercolor painting. They're not in any particular order, and perhaps only one of these applies to you or more than one. Let me know in the comments. So let's dive in. So reason number one why you may not be getting any better at watercolor painting is that you don't ever finish your work, or that you often abandon pieces halfway through. I know what you're thinking, but Michelle, I get halfway through and I know I've ruined it. What's the point of continuing? I'm just wasting my time. I'm not going to end up with something workable. So I may just as well abandon that and start something new. But the difficulty with this approach is that you never go through that process of finishing paintings. Watercolor paintings go through what they call an ugly stage. You get this with all art, but particularly art where you work light to dark, because you don't get the strong darks in until the end. You don't even get to see if the painting is going to be any good until you go through that end process. And even if you're absolutely 100% certain that the work is ruined and you're right, it's no good, this gives you an absolute fun time to experiment and throw lots of stuff on your paper and just try out some new techniques, some new colors, some new ways of working that you wouldn't have tried before. Every painting is a learning experience. Try always to finish your work. Reason number two why you might not be getting any better at watercolor painting is you're always trying to copy other artists' styles, or you've got a certain style in your head, a way of painting. You would like to be a botanical painter. You would like to be a loose, free painter. The problem with all of this is, honestly, you don't get to choose. Your style is what your style is. It's like trying to change your eye color. Sure, you could put in colored contact lenses, but you'd never quite look like yourself. And I say this as someone with sludgy green eyes. And really trying to copy or work to a specific style is just going down a rabbit hole. You won't really get anywhere. You won't find your true artistic self. What you need to do instead is concentrate on the actual painting process. Concentrate on what you like doing. Concentrate on the way you like working. Figure out drawing, figure out color mixing, figure out all of the things and just paint the things that you like to paint. Eventually, your style will find you. Trying to copy other people's styles only leads to frustration. If you're someone who's loose and sloppy and loves working freely, you're never going to be a botanical artist. And if you're a complete control freak like me, you're never going to be a very loose painter. But you can absolutely find a unique and artistic way of working that's in tune with your own personality and your own style. And you won't find that by trying to force someone else's style onto your own. Now, the third reason you may not be getting any better at watercolor painting is that you're using poor materials. It can be quite hard to judge this. And let me tell you that students' quality materials are very, very good. They're almost as good as artists' quality materials. But what you want to avoid is what we would call in the UK stationery, or perhaps in America you might call it drugstore. Things that you buy in shops that aren't really art shops. They've just got a whole load of stuff in there. And sometimes they can appear to have very fancy brand names, but usually it's just something they've slapped on there to make them look posh. And so you need to think about your art materials. As I said, I am not a believer that you need to buy Arches watercolor paper and Daniel Smith paints before you can be any good. That's absolutely not true. But if there are any aspects of your work where you think, well, I just don't like the way these paints look. They're just not very strong. I don't see these strong, bright colors that other artists online use. Or this paper is always pilling up. It buckles really, really easily, and it seems to ruin all of my work, or I just can't get on with these brushes. And you can get really good cheap synthetic brushes, but if you're buying 20 cheap brushes, one of these online retailers, we all know the ones where you get 20 brushes for $3. Honestly, if you've only got $3, you're better off buying one decent brush in a sale. So it's just worth thinking about whether or not your materials are holding you back. Most artists' materials can be bought singly, and one thing I always advise people on a budget to do is to replace their low quality paints as they run out with a single tube of a better colour, because some paints are stronger than others, some colours will run out more quickly. It's an easy way to upgrade your art materials without having to buy a whole new set, and as I said, you don't have to spend a fortune. Number 4 reason you might not be getting any better at watercolor painting, and this one is a big one. It's lack of deliberate practice. Now, I didn't say lack of practice, I said lack of deliberate practice. So there are all sorts of books you can read about deliberate practice. I actually made a video about it. If I can find that video, it's getting increasingly hard to find my own videos. Now I've got hundreds on here, but I'll link that one in the video description if I can find it. But what deliberate practice is something that sports people and business people use all the time. They don't just keep practicing something because you may not get anywhere. Now, you may not be able to afford tuition, but that doesn't mean you can't analyse your own work. So, for example, if you were a tennis player and you just kept going and playing tennis every week and you felt you were never getting any better, what about setting up a video camera to film yourself playing and really look at your serve and all of these other things? I know nothing about tennis, and then you would be able to analyse where you're going wrong. So when it comes to painting, the simplest thing to think is when you get to the end, look at your painting, think about what went right, try to remember what went right about your painting and how you achieved those effects or how you mixed those colours. Maybe take some notes and then try to look at what went wrong. Was your cloud definition, your sky, really, really bad, but everything else worked out? Then now is your time to go off and study some videos about skies and painting clouds. Deliberate practice is as simple as analysing your own work and seeing the areas where you need to learn more. Number 5 is poor tuition, and sometimes you may not even realise that the tuition you're getting is poor. Now, this could be a tuition that you're paying for, it could be a class that you've gone to for years, it could be stuff that you're looking at online. I know several really top watercolour painters who make a lot of money teaching painting online, and their perspective drawing is rubbish. No, I'm not going to tell you who they are, but these things can mislead you. And I once was teaching a regular class, and we had 3 ladies come in from another class that was a little distance away. It was their first time in my class, and they were astonished that I allowed them to draw. And they said, "Oh, the teacher we've been going to for years, she never lets us draw. She insists we must always trace our work." Now, what does that say to me? That says to me that the teacher doesn't know how to draw. So if you're in a class where the teaching is very limited and the teacher expects you only to work in exactly the same way as them, or to use traced outlines, or to never deviate from their techniques, it can be an indication that either they're a control freak or they just simply don't know anything outside that set of skills. Now, they may still have something to teach you, but consider whether the tuition you're getting is good enough or not. Try different things, because it might just be the push that you need to take your work to the next level. And if you are interested in any of my own art courses, I'll link all of those in the description of this video. Thousands of students have successfully taken courses with me, and you can read all the reviews online and see if they might be right for you. So we're about halfway through. Can I ask you very quickly, if you're enjoying this content and getting some value from it, could you please click the like button? Consider subscribing to the channel. I've got over 300 free painting and drawing videos on this channel. And by free subscribing, you help my channel to reach more people. This channel, unlike many art channels on YouTube, is fully CAD approved. Thanks so much for your support. So reason number 6 why you might not be getting any better at watercolor painting, and this is one of my top ones, actually. This is one of the most important ones, and it's related to the last thing we spoke about, which is you might have a bad underdrawing. You may have a lack of drawing skills. Now, I see so many people say, well, I'm not interested in drawing, Michelle, I just want to paint, so I trace the picture and then I can just get on with the painting, as if painting and drawing were 2 completely different skills. Let me remind you that when you're painting, you're just drawing with a brush, and an underdrawing will only get you so far. You still need the manual dexterity of manipulating the brush around the paper. Now, you might say to me, well, I just can't draw, Michelle. I've tried, I just can't do it. And what I would say is that anyone can learn to draw. It's not an all or nothing skill. It's not a I can draw or I can't draw. It's a improve gradually skill. I've got a video all about some really simple tips to improve your drawing quickly. I'll link that video right at the end of this video so you can watch that one next if you would like to. You can learn to draw and it will improve your painting. There are lots of things that can be adjusted on watercolor paintings. It's not a medium, as people say it is, that is completely, you can't make a mistake, you can't adjust anything. There are actually lots of ways of correcting mistakes and adjusting mistakes. Again, I think I've got a video about how to correct the most often made mistakes in watercolor painting. I'll link that one in the description too. But there's one mistake that's really hard, if not impossible, to correct, and that's your drawing. So make sure that your drawing is correct before you start painting and that you are happy with it, whether it's just, a couple of lines, a horizon and a pathway for a landscape, or whether it's a really detailed drawing. If you're not happy with the drawing, don't start painting because it's not going to work out well. The number 7 reason why you might not be getting any better at watercolor painting is because your paint is puddling on the paper because you've got a lot of buckling going on. You must find a way of avoiding this. Now, most of you, if you've watched my videos before, know that I'm a big advocate for paper stretching. There's a lot of nonsense talked about paper stretching. There's a very easy way to do it. I'll link the video for that in the description of this video. Wow, have I got a lot of videos for you to watch today. But stretching your paper will stop buckling. Now, it's not going to just affect the way, the paper looks and, when it's dry, how it looks bumpy and it's not very nice to look at. It's nothing to do with that. It's the fact that if your paint sits in dips, in puddles, then you will get uneven drying, and that's when you get all sorts of drying lines happening. Stretch your paper. If you don't want to do that, at least use a block. And if you can't do that, then at least tape your paper down before you start. Now, at number 8, we have the myth of happy accidents. Of course, some pretty things can happen as your watercolor paints dry, but the idea that you have no control over them or how they move on the paper is just nonsense, and this is sometimes used as an excuse. We talked about poor tuition. If a teacher tells you that there's no way of controlling what the paint does on the paper, you should just go with it and throw the paint on and, work freely and see what happens, or all of this nonsense that people put out. If they're not telling you how to control the paint, and you should be able to control the watercolor paint, not 100%, nothing's 100% controllable, but you should be able to control the watercolor paint to a large degree. There are very simple rules for why and when it bleeds and how it dries, for how to get it to dry flat, to how to make things like cauliflowers and blooms and backgrounds when you want them and how to avoid them when you don't. Be very suspicious of anyone who talks too much about happy accidents, because a proper teacher should be able to teach you how to control your watercolor paint so that you get the results you want. The number 9 reasons why you might not be getting any better at watercolor painting. And this is a big one, and it either applies to you or it doesn't. But of course, keep watching because we still have number 10 to go. And at number 9, we have always rescuing your work with pen. Now, I see this quite often with students who haven't quite understood how to get a lot of tonal contrast in their work. So their work lacks drama, it lacks definition, and they get to the end and they're just like, no, I don't know, nothing looks very defined. What will I do about this? I'll pick up a pen and I'll start outlining stuff. Now, let's be clear, I'm not against using pen and watercolor together. I've got lots of tutorials on this channel about using ink and watercolor. It's a great medium. I love it very much. Most professional artists, and this isn't an exact rule, but most professional artists would put the ink on first and then the watercolor. Now, one way you can tell whether or not you're using ink as a medium or just in order to rescue a bad watercolor is to try this out. So what you want to do is make a decision at the beginning of your painting. Am I going to use ink in this painting or am I not? If you are, have a go at putting it on first, and then you've got the freedom of chucking all your watercolors on top. You'll be able to work a little bit more loosely than usual. But if you decide at the beginning that you're not going to use ink, try and stick to that. And then when you get to the end of the painting, ask yourself why you're not happy with how it looks and why you feel the urge to put a load of pen on top. And I can give you the answer here and now. It's called tonal contrast. You do not have enough contrast between your lights and darks. Therefore, things aren't showing up as much or giving you as much drama as you would like. I've got a video all about improving your tonal contrast. I'll leave it in the description. At number 10, another big one, another big reason why you might not be getting any better at watercolor painting, and that's because you're not taking breaks and allowing things to dry. Now, when I'm doing a painting, I take many hours over my paintings because I've got quite a stylized way of working, and I'll take many breaks. And nowadays I'm often filming as well, so I naturally take breaks in order to go and do video editing or admin or things like that, or make courses. So I naturally build in breaks. What beginners tend to do is they tend to attack a watercolor painting as if they're driving a race car, and they're going to drive it faster and faster and faster until they crash it into a wall. Now, professional artists tend not to do that. We tend to take breaks and just assess things. Is it finished? Isn't it finished? What shall I do with the sky? I'm not sure. I'm feeling a bit tired. Let's put it on a shelf and look at it with fresh eyes tomorrow. From a medical point of view, especially if you're getting older like I am, you need to rest your eyes. And from a watercolor painting point of view, you almost always need to let things dry. So particularly with a large landscape, there's going to be a point where everything's a bit wet and you just need to let things dry. If you don't let things dry properly, then everything's going to bleed into other things. In watercolor paints, there's something called gum arabic, and it's an adhesive, and it actually is meant to stick your paint to the paper. Now, if you're going to put a second layer on top of something, it's far better to let that first layer get completely dry, because then when you layer over, the first layer is going to disturb a lot less because it's already adhered somewhat to the paper. You can also be tempted if you're in a situation where you've got a limited amount of time. I used to teach 2-hour classes, and the amount of people who in the last 15 minutes would ruin their painting, rush to get it finished, and they said to me, "Oh, I know I'll never get it finished at home." Well, that's a choice. I understand that life can be busy, but maybe you could decide not to rush your painting and to give yourself half an hour at some later stage at home. Rushing, lack of patience, lack of taking breaks, these are all things that can lead to you not improving as fast as you would like with your watercolor paintings. So, have any of these things that I've spoken about today rung a little bit of a bell in the back of your head? Do fess up in the comments. Absolution will be granted for all confessions in the comments. Let me know if any of these things apply to you and if this video has been helpful. Before you leave this video, don't forget to have a look in the video description. All of those other videos that I spoke about that may be helpful to you will be linked below. You can also find out about all of my online courses. I have some free ones that you can take as well. I also have some free downloadable PDFs that you can grab for no money whatsoever. And if when I spoke about drawing, it rang a bit of a bell and you thought to yourself, "Oh, I really do need to improve my drawing," you're going to enjoy watching this video next.